March 1944. Camp Kenedy, Texas. The thin blue-grey army mess tray trembled in Helga Schneider's hands as she stared at the food before her. A pork chop glistening with fat, mashed potatoes crowned with melting butter, green beans steaming beside a roll, and impossibly, a slice of apple pie with a scoop of ice cream slowly melting at its side. After 16 months as a Nachrichtenhelferin, a female signal auxiliary, in Tunisia, subsisting on increasingly meager rations of hard bread and watery soup, this abundance paralyzed her. Tears welled in her eyes, shocking the American servicewoman who had guided her through the cafeteria line. "It's just a regular dinner," the American said, confused by the reaction. But for Helga, it was a revelation that contradicted everything she had been told about American barbarism and deprivation. Across American shores that spring, approximately 500 German women would undergo similar moments of dissonance as they confronted a reality fundamentally at odds with Nazi propaganda. These Blitzmädchen, or lightning girls, a nickname derived from the lightning insignia on their uniforms, had served as telephone operators, radio interceptors, cipher clerks, and administrative staff for the Wehrmacht. Captured primarily during the North African campaign and subsequent Allied advances in Europe, they represented a little-known chapter in America's POW program. While constituting less than 0.1% of the total 425,000 German prisoners held on American soil, their experiences would prove disproportionately influential in post-war Germany's relationship with America. Their arrival at specialized women's compounds in Camp Kenedy, Texas, Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, and 3 other facilities marked the beginning of a profound psychological transformation. Military records show that these women, who had been promised brutal treatment by American savages, instead received accommodation superior to what most had experienced in their military service. Each woman was issued 2,800 daily calories, nearly double what German civilians received in 1944, along with standard army toiletries including soap, shampoo, and sanitary supplies that had become luxuries in Germany. The disparity between expectation and reality created immediate cognitive dissonance. Greta Müller, a 23-year-old radio operator captured in Tunisia, recorded in her diary, later preserved in Army intelligence archives, "I waited for the Americans to show their true nature. Instead, they gave me a clean bed with 2 blankets, a full meal with meat, and asked if I needed anything else. I wept that night, not from mistreatment, but from the shock of kindness." This kindness appeared calculated, but military correspondence reveals it was simply standard American protocol applied equally to enemy personnel. Women's quarters included electric lighting, hot water showers, and heated barracks. Basic amenities in America, but extraordinary luxuries to women who had spent months in field conditions. Camp Kennedy's records indicate that newly arriving female prisoners gained an average of 6.8 pounds during their first month in custody, physical evidence of the nutritional gulf between German military rations and American standard provisions. For German women who had been told Americans would starve or violate them, the simple act of receiving 3 full meals daily represented an ideological earthquake. The carefully cultivated Nazi narrative of American weakness collapsed in the face of butter, sugar, and meat served casually, even to enemies. Women who had been valued communication specialists in the Wehrmacht, elite among female auxiliaries, discovered they were being fed better as captives than they had been as valued military assets. What began as confusion over abundant food would evolve into a comprehensive reassessment of everything these women had been taught about America, democracy, and their own leadership. Their journey from Nazi ideological certainty to profound questioning had begun, not through interrogation or propaganda, but through the simple, devastating generosity of an American meal served to an enemy in a Texas camp on a cool March evening in 1944. The Nachrichtenhelferin and Corps, established in 1939, had drawn young German women from middle-class backgrounds into the Nazi war machine with promises of adventure and patriotic duty. These women, typically aged 18 to 25, received specialized training in communications, encryption, and administrative functions critical to Wehrmacht operations. By 1942, over 8,000 such auxiliaries served across occupied Europe and North Africa, wearing Feldgrau uniforms with the distinctive lightning bolt insignia on their sleeves. Unlike male soldiers, they had been assured they would never face capture, an assurance that collapsed during the swift Allied advances of 1943-44. The first significant group, 127 women, surrendered with the Afrika Korps in Tunisia in May 1943. Wehrmacht commander Hans-Jürgen von Arnim had ordered their evacuation, but transportation shortages left them behind as American forces closed in. Before capture, their commanding officers had conducted briefings described in later interviews as preparation for the worst. Nazi propaganda had portrayed American soldiers as undisciplined criminals, many of Jewish descent, who would violate and mistreat German women. "We were told to expect rape, starvation, and possibly execution," recalled Ingrid Weber in a 1965 interview preserved in military archives. Some women contemplated suicide rather than surrender. The reality proved dramatically different. Processing centers in North Africa provided female prisoners with medical examinations by female personnel, separate quarters from male prisoners, and standard Army K rations, providing 3,200 calories daily, including canned meat, powdered eggs, biscuits, chocolate, and cigarettes. Women who had subsisted on dwindling German rations of 1,700 calories found themselves unable to finish these emergency rations. American field hospital records document that 38% of captured German women showed signs of malnutrition upon intake, a condition quickly remedied under American care. The journey to America aboard converted troopships like the USS West Point represented another unexpected revelation. Naval records confirm that female prisoners traveled in separate women's quarters under the supervision of female military personnel. Standard naval meals included fresh bread, eggs, meat, vegetables, and desserts, a level of provisioning that many German women had not experienced since before the war. "I gained 5 pounds during the crossing," Johanna Müller noted in correspondence later examined by military intelligence. "The Americans complained about their food while we ate more at each meal than we had seen in a week." The ships docked at Newport News, Virginia, where the women faced their first encounter with mainland America. As they disembarked, the industrial capacity of the Norfolk Naval Shipyard stunned them. Dozens of vessels under construction, cranes moving massive components, and an abundance of materials that contradicted everything they had been told about American production limitations. Military police reports note that several women broke formation, not in escape attempts, but in sheer disbelief at the scale of operations visible from the dock. Processing into the American POW system provided further surprises. Each woman received a complete outfit of new clothing, including undergarments, shirts, slacks, a coat and shoes, items that had become increasingly scarce in Germany. Medical examinations were conducted by female personnel with privacy and dignity maintained. Dental care, unavailable to most German civilians since 1941, was provided as standard procedure. The intake processing included hot showers with unlimited soap and hot water, luxury that had vanished from German civilian life. Transportation to permanent camps occurred via standard passenger trains with upholstered seats and dining service. Union Pacific Railroad records from April 1944 document meal service consisting of chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and cake for a prisoner transport bound for Texas. The German women ate the same meals as their American guards, served on china plates with metal utensils, a standard the Reich no longer maintained even for officers. As the landscape of America passed by their windows, the vast farms, small towns with automobiles, and cities unmarked by bombing, these women began the journey from disbelief to recognition. The America they were seeing with their own eyes bore no resemblance to the weak, disorganized nation described in Nazi propaganda. Their education in American abundance had only just begun. The women's compound at Camp Kenedy featured barracks divided into rooms housing 4 prisoners each, a striking contrast to the open bay accommodations of male POW camps. Military records show that each woman received an individual bed with sheets and blankets, a footlocker for personal items, and access to washing facilities with hot water available twice daily. At Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, the second largest women's POW facility, similar quarters occupied a section of a former Army training base, with newly constructed bathroom facilities that included privacy partitions, a consideration that surprised prisoners accustomed to collective military accommodations. Daily routines quickly established a rhythm unlike anything the women had experienced in German service. Reveille sounded at 6 Gauss a.m., followed by breakfast at 6:30. The mess halls, staffed by American personnel with German prisoners assisting, served meals that American quartermaster records document in precise detail. Breakfast typically included eggs, toast with butter and jam, oatmeal or cereal with milk, coffee with sugar, and fruit juice. This single meal contained more protein and calories than many of these women had received in an entire day during their final months of service. The first time I saw an American breakfast, I thought it must be a special occasion, wrote Elsa Bachmann in a letter later confiscated by censors. When I realized this was normal, I understood why the American soldiers had seemed so strong. They ate like this every day, even in wartime. Lunch and dinner continued this pattern of abundance. Standard mess hall menus preserved in Army archives show meals featuring meat at both services, typically beef, pork, or chicken prepared in various ways, accompanied by vegetables, potatoes or rice, bread and butter, dessert, and coffee or milk. The daily caloric provision averaged 2,800 calories per prisoner, with protein comprising 20% of intake. By comparison, German female auxiliaries in 1944 received official rations of 1,500 calories daily, with meat limited to 100 grams weekly when available. Work assignments occupied weekday hours from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., with duties assigned based on skills. Many women worked in camp laundry facilities, kitchens, or administrative offices. Unlike their male counterparts, female prisoners rarely performed agricultural labor outside the camps. These assignments paid the standard POW wage of 80 cents per day, credited to individual accounts accessible for canteen purchases. The camp canteens revealed another dimension of American abundance. PX records from Fort Oglethorpe show a standard inventory including toothpaste, soap, shampoo, writing paper, pencils, reading materials, candy bars, soft drinks, and basic cosmetics. A tube of Colgate toothpaste cost 10 cents, a Hershey bar 5 cents, and a bottle of Coca-Cola 5 cents, items that had vanished from German civilian shops years earlier. With daily wages of 80 cents, prisoners could purchase substantial comfort items weekly. Medical care provided further contrast with German conditions. Camp Kenedy's hospital logs document routine access to female doctors for women prisoners, monthly health examinations, dental care, and unlimited access to sanitary supplies, items severely rationed in Germany since 1941. A former nurse among the prisoners noted in debriefing interviews that the medical supplies for prisoners exceeded what German hospitals had for civilians. Letters home became exercises in careful omission. Censorship records show that descriptions of food and living conditions were frequently redacted from outgoing mail, as military intelligence recognized the potential propaganda value of such information. Despite these restrictions, families in Germany began to notice their captured daughters appeared healthier in photographs than before capture. By summer 1944, as Allied forces pushed into France, newly arriving female prisoners brought reports of civilian conditions in Germany that shocked even the camp administrators. German civilians were receiving official rations of 1,100 calories daily, with fats and proteins increasingly scarce. Meanwhile, America fed enemy prisoners nearly 3 times that amount as a matter of routine policy. This stark numerical reality, experienced 3 times daily at the mess hall tables, began dismantling ideological certainties more effectively than any propaganda lecture could achieve. The realization dawned gradually but inexorably. They lived better as American prisoners than as German servicewomen. This uncomfortable truth would force them to question what other Nazi certainties might prove equally false. Work assignments beyond camp boundaries provided German women prisoners their first unfiltered glimpse of American society. By late 1944, labor shortages led military authorities to place female POWs in hospital laundries, military clerical positions, and base kitchens under supervision. At Fort Oglethorpe, 23 women with nursing training assisted at the base hospital, working alongside American nurses caring for wounded servicemen. These assignments, documented in Army employment records, paid the standard POW wage of 80 cents daily, approximately $14 in 2025 currency, but offered something more valuable: direct observation of American daily life. The American servicewomen supervising these details presented a particularly disruptive contrast to Nazi gender ideology. WACs and Army nurses drove vehicles, made independent decisions, gave orders to male subordinates, and received equal pay for equal work. Concepts fundamentally at odds with the Kinder, Küche, Kirche, children, kitchen, church paradigm these German women had been raised to embrace. Helga Schmidt, who had served as a cipher clerk, recorded in her journal, "The American woman lieutenant speaks 5 languages, attended university, and commands men without apology. She asked about my education as if it were natural that a woman should be as educated as a man." Camp libraries and recreation rooms provided access to American magazines like Life, Time, and Ladies' Home Journal, publications that depicted a consumer society beyond German imagination. Military censorship reviewed these materials but generally permitted their circulation, believing exposure to American domestic life served re-education purposes. The contrast between magazine advertisements showing refrigerators, automobiles, and modern appliances against the backdrop of Germany's collapsing infrastructure created cognitive dissonance. One prisoner wrote home, in a letter later redacted by censors, "The Americans have machines to wash clothes, machines to clean floors, machines even to wash dishes. Their poorest homes have electricity and running water. What have we been fighting for?" When permitted to listen to radio broadcasts or view newsreels, the women encountered American perspectives on the war's progress. Initial skepticism gave way to reluctant belief as Allied forces liberated Paris, crossed the Rhine, and approached Berlin. The psychological impact intensified when Red Cross packages began arriving for German POWs in April 1944. Standard parcels contained coffee, chocolate, canned meat, soap, and cigarettes, items increasingly unobtainable in Germany. These packages, delivered weekly, provided supplemental comfort beyond the already adequate camp provisions. American holiday celebrations introduced cultural concepts foreign to the Nazi worldview. Thanksgiving 1944 presented particular fascination, a secular national holiday centered on gratitude and abundance. Army records confirm that POW mess halls served the traditional turkey dinner with all trimmings to German prisoners. At Camp Kenedy, the women's mess consumed 14 turkeys, 120 pounds of potatoes, 15 gallons of gravy, 30 pumpkin pies, and 8 gallons of ice cream in a single meal, quantities that would have fed a German company for a week. This demonstration of casual plenty, explained as an ordinary American tradition, communicated American productive capacity more effectively than any propaganda film. Christmas 1944 brought unexpected generosity. Local church groups, despite having sons and husbands fighting in Europe, delivered gift packages to German women prisoners. These packages, documented in camp records, typically contained hand-knitted scarves or socks, homemade cookies, candy, small toiletries, and Christmas cards expressing Christian fellowship. Margareta Weber recalled in a 1976 interview, "The pastor's wife who brought gifts had a son fighting in Germany. I asked why she would bring presents to her enemies. She said, 'Christ teaches us to love our enemies.' This was not the Christianity the Nazi Party had taught us. Religious services, conducted by military chaplains and local clergy, presented Christianity unmarried to nationalism. Another challenging concept for women raised under Nazi religious policy. Catholic and Protestant services were available weekly, with Jewish chaplains occasionally visiting as well. This religious plurality, presented without state control, contradicted the Reich Church's nationalist theology. Some prisoners maintained ideological resistance. Approximately 15% remained committed National Socialists, according to intelligence evaluations, refusing to acknowledge changing realities. They formed insular groups within the camps, maintaining Nazi salutes in private and pressuring others to resist American propaganda. Yet their numbers dwindled as Germany's military situation deteriorated, and America's overwhelming productive capacity became increasingly undeniable. The daily reality of American abundance systematically dismantled Nazi claims of superiority more effectively than any re-education program. By early 1945, the letter-writing privileges afforded to German women prisoners produced an extraordinary reversal of wartime norms. Rather than receiving care packages from home, these POWs began sending American goods to their families in Germany. Camp records document a striking pattern. Women prisoners purchased items from camp canteens using their work credits, carefully packaging coffee, chocolate, soap, and canned goods to mail home. Military censors, initially concerned about the propaganda implications, ultimately permitted these shipments as the war's outcome grew certain. Each parcel told its own story of American abundance. A typical package from Camp Kenedy, preserved in military records, contained 2 pounds of coffee, 4 Hershey chocolate bars, a tin of Spam, a bar of Ivory soap, cigarettes, sugar cubes, and chewing gum. The total value averaged $3.85, approximately 5 days' wages for a POW, but representing luxuries unobtainable at any price in Germany. Between January and May 1945, the 500 female prisoners sent approximately 2,800 such packages to Germany, a statistical anomaly of captives supporting free citizens rather than the reverse. Censorship limited what prisoners could write about camp conditions, but the packages spoke volumes. Helga Müller's mother wrote back, in a letter translated by military intelligence, "We cannot understand how you, a prisoner, send us food when we can find none. The coffee you sent was the first real coffee we have tasted since 1941. Your father wept when he smelled it brewing." These tangible demonstrations of American resources accomplished what words could not, concrete evidence that contradicted years of propaganda. As Allied forces advanced into Germany, newsreels and permitted newspaper access brought increasingly disturbing information. The discovery of concentration camps created profound psychological crises for many women prisoners. Ilse Braun, who had served as a radio operator in Tunisia, wrote in her journal, later acquired by Army intelligence, "We were shown photographs of Buchenwald. I vomited afterward. If this is true, what does it make us? What does it make me, who wore the uniform of this regime? The Americans feed us better than our government fed its own people. What does this say about the cause I served?" Military intelligence interviews conducted in April 1945 reveal the extent of ideological fracturing. Approximately 62% of female prisoners openly acknowledged Nazi propaganda had deceived them about American society and military capabilities. Another 23% expressed uncertainty but admitted significant contradictions between what they had been taught and what they had experienced. Only 15% maintained rigid ideological commitment, typically manifesting in isolation from other prisoners. The news of Hitler's suicide in April 1945 and Germany's subsequent surrender triggered varied responses. Camp records document 3 suicide attempts among the most committed Nazi adherents, all prevented by American personnel. The majority, however, experienced what psychologists would later term ideological collapse, the rapid disintegration of a worldview, in the face of overwhelming contrary evidence. Greta Fischer, a former cipher clerk, expressed the common sentiment in a censored letter. Everything we believed has proven false. The Americans, whom we were told were weak and decadent, defeated us while feeding their enemies better than we fed our own people. I no longer know what to believe, except what I can see with my own eyes. As Germany's surrender became reality, the women faced uncertain futures. Military documents reveal internal debates about repatriation procedures. Unlike male prisoners, many of whom faced potential war crimes investigations, the female auxiliaries were classified as non-combatants despite their military roles. This technical distinction meant most would be eligible for early repatriation. Yet surveys conducted in the women's compounds yielded surprising results. Approximately 28% expressed reluctance to return to Germany, citing fear of conditions under Allied occupation and shame at facing families after defeat. The physical contrast between prisoners and the German civilian population became increasingly apparent. Medical records from spring 1945 show female POWs in American custody averaged 132 pounds, approximately 7 pounds heavier than at capture and within normal BMI ranges. Meanwhile, German civilians were experiencing severe malnutrition, with average weights declining 15–20% below pre-war norms. This physical embodiment of different conditions, prisoners healthier than free citizens, created what one military psychologist termed the ultimate refutation of Nazi ideology. As repatriation plans progressed, these women prepared to return to a homeland physically and ideologically destroyed, carrying with them the undeniable lesson that their enemy had treated them with greater humanity than their own government had shown its citizens. Repatriation began in November 1945, 6 months after Germany's surrender. The women who had entered American captivity as convinced Nazis left transformed, physically, psychologically, and ideologically. Military transport ships carried them back across an Atlantic they had crossed as prisoners, now returning to a homeland many barely recognized. Each woman received a final Red Cross package containing food, toiletries, and 10 pounds of personal items purchased with remaining camp wages, a last experience of American abundance to carry home. They arrived in Bremen to a Germany shattered beyond Nazi propaganda's worst warnings. The contrast stunned even those mentally prepared for devastation. Bombed cities, collapsed infrastructure, and desperate civilians created jarring dissonance with the orderly abundance they had experienced in American camps. One returnee, Frieda Müller, later recalled, "We stepped from the ship looking healthy, with suitcases containing food and soap. The Germans meeting us were gaunt, wearing patched clothing. They stared at us as though we were aliens, not returning daughters. In that moment, I understood completely what had happened to my country." Family reunions proved emotionally complex. Military interviews conducted with returnees in the American occupation zone documented consistent patterns. Families shocked by their daughter's healthy appearance, disbelief at accounts of humane treatment, and sometimes resentment that prisoners had fared better than civilians. Maria Schmidt, who had served as a telephone operator in North Africa, found her mother 20 pounds lighter than when she had left for service. "She touched my face, saying I looked like I had been on holiday while they starved," Schmidt told an American interviewer in 1946. "When I showed her the coffee and chocolate I had brought, she began sobbing uncontrollably." The knowledge these women carried, practical experience with American organizational methods, nutrition and efficiency, became unexpectedly valuable. Occupation authorities noted that former women prisoners frequently obtained administrative positions in the rebuilding government infrastructure, their familiarity with American procedures proving advantageous. Military government records from 1946–1947 show that 38% of former female POWs in the American zone secured employment with occupation authorities or German civil administration within 6 months of repatriation, compared to 12% of women without such experience. Their observations about American food systems proved particularly influential. Several former prisoners established community kitchens modeled after camp mess halls, efficiently feeding maximum people with available resources. In Heidelberg, Ingrid Weber, who had worked in the Camp Kenedy mess, organized a feeding program that served 1,200 daily meals using American organizational techniques she had observed in captivity. These programs emphasized nutrition and efficiency rather than traditional German cooking methods, introducing concepts of balanced meals with protein requirements, vitamin content, and caloric minimums. Longer-term influences emerged in the early 1950s as West Germany rebuilt. Former POWs frequently became advocates for American-style consumer culture and democratic institutions. Their personal testimonies about American abundance carried unique credibility. They had experienced it as enemy prisoners, not as allies or through propaganda. When the first American-style supermarkets opened in West Germany in 1957, former prisoners were among their strongest supporters. Understanding the connection between distribution efficiency and consumer abundance they had witnessed in America. The statistical contrast between their POW experience and German civilian reality remained the most powerful evidence. While German civilians had subsisted on approximately 100 daily calories during the war's final year, these women had received 2,800 calories as enemy prisoners. While German civilians had lacked soap, sugar, and coffee for years, American camps had provided these items in abundance. While German cities lay in ruins from Allied bombing, American infrastructure had continued functioning seamlessly despite wartime demands. These numerical realities, experienced personally rather than communicated through propaganda, could not be dismissed. In various post-war interviews spanning 3 decades, these women consistently identified their first American meal as the moment their ideological transformation began. Helene Fischer, interviewed for German television in 1970, recalled, "They gave me a tray with more food than I had seen in months. I realized then that everything I had been taught was wrong. If America could feed its prisoners this way while fighting a global war, the Reich's deprivation wasn't noble sacrifice, but catastrophic failure." Their story represents an extraordinary chapter in wartime psychology. Enemies transform not through indoctrination, but through simple, undeniable abundance. The women who cried over their first American meals became unwitting ambassadors for the system that had defeated their nation, carrying home the revolutionary message that democratic capitalism could create prosperity beyond National Socialism's comprehension. Their tears over unexpected abundance had watered the seeds of Germany's democratic future.